Hello, my name is Marlene Weisenbeck. I'm a Franciscan sister of Perpetual Adoration and the convener of the La Crosse Task Force to End Modern Slavery. As the second largest criminal activity in the world, we encounter human trafficking wherever we are, globally and locally. As you view these stories, I ask you to gaze upon the person. Consider the burden that she or he is carrying. Contemplate each situation, and then imitate others who are helping to move them out toward healing and wholeness. Gaze. Rest your eyes on what you see and hear. Experience this visual evidence of persons who are captured and terrorized through the strategies that brought them into the life of modern slavery. Though your eyes and thoughts may be drawn elsewhere, bring them back to the person that is the focus of each story. Consider. Allow your mind to study and understand the horrific situations that brought these individuals into their captivity. Consider the humiliation to which victims are submitted. Deepen your knowledge of the events that made them vulnerable to recruitment into this life. Do you sense a challenge or a call? Contemplate. Be present to what you see and hear. Listen with your inner senses to the meaning of the story. Listen to the cries of the enslaved without judgment. Then embrace an unceasing prayer for all those involved and all those who work to bring freedom to those in this underground economy of evil. Finally, imitate. All prayer moves us toward making efforts to create relationships of wholeness worthy of our God-given human dignity. Join in some way with others in bringing hope and freedom to the suffering world. Thank you.
So let's start out with talking a little bit about your childhood. What did your childhood look like to you?
Well, growing up, my mother and my father got married really young. He was in the Navy. My mother, they came from two different backgrounds. My dad's part of the family was very conservative, and my mother's side of the family was different. When I say different, I mean my dad's family is not very affectionate. They don't tell you they love you and stuff like that. Although they do, they just don't express it that way. So growing up was very different. My mother and father were both addicted to alcohol and drugs, and they had a very violent relationship. So I saw a lot of violence in my home.
And was this in Minnesota?
My mother and father met in California, and they stayed there for about 4 years, and then they moved back here. So we moved around quite a bit because my dad was in the Navy, and then they had my youngest brother here, and she separated from him because of the abuse, and we went back to California.
Flora, were you exposed to prostitution at an early age? Did you know anybody in your circle of influence, friends, family, schoolmates, that were involved in prostitution? And/or what were your thoughts of prostitution when you were growing up?
Well, growing up, my mother was actually involved in prostitution. I didn't know what it was at the time. She would have different men in and out of the home to feed her drug habit and things like that. But I didn't actually become aware of that until I was about 18, and I was already in the life. And that kind of influenced me staying in the life.
Okay, so your mother influenced you because her behavior became normalized for
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Okay, tell me a little bit about what did your recruitment look like? When were you first initiated into the life?
I was first initiated when I was 14. I ran away from home. My mother had just committed suicide. So I moved here from California when I was 13. And within a year, I ran away from home. I was very rebellious and didn't want to, follow the rules that my dad had in place. I thought that he was being really controlling. I felt very out of place here because all I knew was my mother. So when I moved here, I felt all alone. And so I met a guy in Minneapolis, downtown. I ran away. And he was a really nice guy, and I thought he was my boyfriend. And we would talk over the phone, and he would tell me things like, if you just came and stayed with me, you wouldn't have to follow any rules, and, it's not so bad being with me and things like that. And I thought he really liked me, so I ran away for a weekend with him, and I actually was very intrigued by the things that he was doing, smoking marijuana and, just hanging out with him and his friends. And so one day, after I went back home, I just was like, I'll run away with him, just to stay with him. And within the first week, he took me to another state, and there was another girl. It was him and another guy, and she was already involved in prostitution. I think she was about 17, and so I believe she knew that she was going down what she was going out of town for, and so when we got out of town, we didn't have any money, and I was hungry, and the other guy was buying us food and things like that. And he told the guy that I was with told me things like, well, if you want to eat or you want to go shopping, you need to make money. And I didn't know what he was talking about. So he told me to follow what the other girl was doing, and she would teach me what to do. And we were walking the streets, and it was really dangerous. There was a lot of guys, pimps, walking up and down the street, trying to recruit other girls, being very violent, and things like that.
How old were you at that time, Flora?
14.
How old was your perpetrator?
He was in his early 20s, I think 22.
Okay. So, after you met your perpetrator and you ended up moving in with him?
Yeah, I ran away with him. And we were in another state for a couple months. And I told him I was 18 when I met him, but there was no way that, looking back on the pictures, I looked like a child. I was very young looking. And whether he acted like he believed me, and he probably did. And then I ended up going to jail in Tennessee, and I lied about my age. And so that kind of made it seem like I was real. My age was real because he had to bail me out. So the other guy that we were with had got some information about me being only 12, but I was actually 14. And I was like, well, no, obviously I'm not, because, I just got out of jail and stuff like that. And I ended up telling him my real age when we were on our way back to Minnesota, because the guy that we went with left us there for whatever reasons. And I told him, and that didn't make him not like me. He actually liked me even more when he found out that I was only 14.
Wow. So, were you in Shelby County, Memphis?
I don't know the county.
But were you in Memphis?
Yes.
Okay, so he brought you to the pimp capital of the world.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And you say you were only in Memphis for a couple months?
Mm-hmm.
And then did he bring you back to Minnesota?
He brought me back to Minnesota, and the first night back, he beat me really bad. I had 2 concussions on the side of my head. My eye was closed shut because I wanted to leave him. I had a cell phone that my dad was paying for over the time that I was running away, and he was talking to another girl on my phone, and I tried to take my phone from him, and he beat me really bad. He was kicking me in my head, in my face, and I got away that night, and I went to Hennepin County HCMC. And I was really terrified to go back home because I didn't know how to explain how, I was very ashamed of what I had just done in Tennessee. I was very afraid of what my dad would think. And once he found out that if he kept me bruised, that I wouldn't go home, he continued to beat me. And his family would hear us fight, and they wouldn't help me. I mean.
So he was a gorilla pimp.
He was abusive. I wouldn't say he was a gorilla pimp. I don't think that he was actually. I think he was following behind the guys that he was hanging out with. I don't believe that he really knew what he was doing. But I was so young and easy to manipulate that it was just easy for him to control me.
Okay, Flora, what were some of the threats that he made that were normal for you? What are some of the tactics he used, or some of the threats that kept you in the life, that kept you with him after you got back from Memphis and you were up in Minnesota?
He would physically abuse me. I got involved in drugs, and there was just a lot of. I was such a kid. I was very, very immature in the mind, and it really didn't take a lot. I kind of felt like he was the only one that would accept me after all the things that I had done. I felt very broken being in prostitution, so I didn't have anyone to confide in or to tell them that I wanted to get out because I was so ashamed of what I had been through.
And at this point, your mother had been deceased?
Yes, ma'am.
And you really only had your father?
Yes.
At that point. So, and he knew that?
My dad knew.
Your abuser? No,
he didn't. I ran away for 2 years. So my dad did not know anything.
But your abuser knew that your mother was dead and your dad was the only one in your
Yes.
life? Okay, so he used that as power and control over you.
Yes.
Flora, what did you feel like during that time? What was going through your head? What did you feel about yourself and about your future and the world? What did that look like for you? What did life look like for you when you were going through all that in your teenage years?
I felt very ashamed and broken. I remember when I found out that my mother was involved in prostitution when I was 18, it kind of became normalized for me. Like, well, it's not so bad. My mom used to do it, and I didn't feel so ashamed about it. But as time went on, I started to realize that I just felt really trapped and ashamed.
Thank you. What, in your experience, knowing what you know now, being an advocate at Breaking Free, and hearing and being a facilitator at Life Skills, Job Skills, hearing many, many women's stories, what can you think of that might have made a change in your life that during that time that might have helped you exit the life? Or can you think of anything that, had it happened or come into your life, that could have changed what was going on? What would have helped?
One thing that would have helped me is if my father would have reached out a little bit more. Because my mom committed suicide, I already felt abandoned, and I had neglect issues, so I felt like no one really cared about me anyways. And I just felt like he could have tried to look for me, because it came to a point where he just did not. It felt like he didn't even look for me, and I was a runaway for a long time. And even just having the knowledge to know that what I was doing was not okay, and it was a lot of things that could have helped me, but I just felt isolated from the road.
Lost.
Lost, yeah.
Yeah. I'm very sorry that happened to you. Flora, can you tell us a little bit about what would you like people to know about sex trafficking? And what would you like people to know about you?
I would like people to know that I am a survivor and I'm not a victim anymore. There is hope, and being able to reach out and find the support that I found at Breaking Free has turned my life around, and that I'm not a victim.
Amen. And now you're helping so many other women see where that seed was planted and providing them with direct services and providing them with support.
Yes.
So I thank you very much, Flora.
Thank you.